Our verse today is 2 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 16. But when one turns to the Lord, the veil is removed. Our reflection today continues from that of yesterday. Paul continues to compare the ministry of the new covenant instituted by Jesus with the old covenant, that is, the ministry of Moses, the ministry of the law. In verse 13, Paul takes the Corinthians' minds to an experience in the book of Exodus when Moses went up the mountain of Sinai to encounter God. When Moses came down from the mountain, the skin of his face shone, that is, it radiated, and the people were afraid to come near Moses. Moses had to put a veil over his face when he was with the people, and only removed it when he went up to the mountain to speak to God. You can read Exodus chapter 34, 30 to 35. Moses covered his face with a veil because of the radiance of God's glory shining from the face of Moses, and the people could not stand before it. St. Paul reinterpreted this experience. Paul argues that the people's hearts were hardened, hence they could not look at the face of Moses. Paul was right. In other words, if the people were pure of heart and free from sin, they could have been able to behold the face of Moses and hence the glory of God. Just as Moses had to cover his face with a veil, the same is true with the old covenant. It was not perfect. And so when the old covenant is read, the same spiritual veil covers the hearts of the people. In other words, the people could not understand what was read to them, and so Paul needed to explain this to the Corinthian community. This veil covering the heart is only removed through the knowledge of Jesus Christ. In other words, Jesus gives us the key to interpreting what the people were doing in the Old Testament, what was written in the Old Testament. In our verse, Paul says, when one turns to the Lord, the veil is removed. By this, Paul sees this veil as ignorance of Christ, which closes our eyes to the proper knowledge of Jesus. Proper knowledge of Jesus Christ helps us to see how God worked in the Old Testament. This veil of spiritual ignorance is only removed when one knows Jesus Christ. Turning to the Lord means leaving old ways behind and accepting the new ways taught and lived by Jesus Christ. We must state that this does not mean discarding or throwing away the Old Testament, but understanding its proper context and how Jesus Christ was hidden and already at work in the Old Testament. In the verses following the verse for the day, Paul further shows that those who accept Jesus Christ become free, live the life of the Spirit, and subsequently will behold the glory of the Lord with unveiled faces. That is when we die. Paul may be speaking to us today. As Christians, we need a proper knowledge of Jesus Christ to unlock the Old Covenant, that is, the Old Testament. Even to live our lives properly as Christians who depend on the Scriptures, we need Jesus Christ to remove the spiritual veil of ignorance covering our hearts. We also need to keep our hearts pure and not harden our hearts like the people of Israel. That is the only guarantee to see the Lord with unveiled faces at the end of our lives. Lord, remove the veils covering our hearts and always open our minds to your divine will and presence. Amen. God bless you. Have a lovely day.